Before I got into Ferraris, I was a big Porsche guy. I mean, I still am a Porsche guy. I own a 996, but it kind of started with my sisters. And they were into 911s back in the 80s when I was first starting to drive. And one of them bought this 87 Carrera. So this car, one of my sisters bought in 89. So this car was 2 years old when she bought it. And she's had it ever since. So she's the second owner of this car. And it's kind of neat because when she bought it, you know, she always wanted a 911 and just bought it off of a dealer lot. And it was I think it was at a Nissan dealership on a trade-in, and got it at a pretty good price. It had 60,000 miles on it. It was only a couple years old, and didn't know that a G-body 1987 Carrera was the car you wanted to buy of this generation. This car, this 3.2 liter flat six, is probably one of the most reliable, bulletproof cars of the 911 range. I mean, it's got a lot of things going for it. It has a G50 transmission. It's got so it's got a better transmission than the 915. It's got the 3.2 liters. Got Motronic fuel injection. Just like the modern car. I mean, really nice car. And you know, it's guards red. And this car is kind of neat because it has a gray interior, which is original. But the other thing that's neat is because she's owned it since 1989 and driven it all the time. I mean, she puts it away for winter, drives it, and it has 181,000 miles on it. I've driven this car all of my adult driving career, and I remember several years ago, I think it had like 170,000 miles. It's probably like 160,000 miles on it, and I drove it compared to all my other cars, and I said to my sister, I think it's time for an engine rebuild. We had this engine rebuilt, like I said, I think about 160,000 miles on it. So it's still, I mean, when you talk about 3.2 liter flat six going 150,000 miles, 160,000 miles on its original engine, it was unbelievable. And when we took it apart, the bottom end on this engine was still standard. So we just put standard bearings back in the car. I mean, we replaced the cylinders and heads and all that. I mean, did all the machine work and got everything up to spec. Didn't really build just build a stock motor. But you know, she doesn't care. I mean, this car is plenty fast, plenty fun to drive. But the other thing that's neat about this car is its original paint. Yeah, it's a little gets a little pink, has a couple little dings and scratches through the years, but nothing really bad. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, some of the primer is starting to show through, but this is pretty wild that this is an original paint car and not a trailer queen. She drives this every summer. She drives it from Vermont down to the Cape, and uses it all over the place, and just uses it. And I've been maintaining it in the last several years, so it comes back to me in the wintertime, and I kind of just go through it just to make sure everything's okay with it. So this winter, she dropped it off with me here in New York, and I went inside, and I went to put on the seatbelt, and I found this. The seatbelt was completely torn and hanging there, and the belt buckle, so she had no seatbelt at all. I was like, what happened? So she's like, I think there were some mice or something, or chipmunks, and I said, well, we got to fix that. So I think I can get the seatbelt replaced, hopefully. I don't know if I can get the exact same webbing, but I know that I can get it restrung and keep some of the originality of this car. But when I went to take the rear panel off to get to the seatbelt, guess what I find? Yay. Somebody's been nesting in here, and they just chewed right through the seatbelt. So I have to take this all apart and get the seatbelt out and restring it and all that other stuff. So that's the job for this winter. But it's kind of like this old car that's been with the family for so long, and it's going to be a little fun to just get this stuff done on this old 911. You know, I don't know if you know, post below if you want content like this. I mean, I usually stick with Ferraris. I certainly have a shop full of Ferraris to work on, so it's not like I'm running out of content, but this is a little side project that was just thrown in here. If you want to see more work on this 911, I mean, I certainly can do it, but it's just kind of fun to talk about a car that I've had in my life and my family for a long time. It's like an old friend. So I'm going to get started on this and replace these belts. Well, I got the seat belt out. Yep, the mice really did a number on these guys. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get these re-webbed. The hardware on this stuff, they have new stuff, but it's not exactly the same. It doesn't look the same. So I think what I want to do is just put this stuff in. I mean, this is, you know, it's a little old, but I think that it'll be better to match the other side. Hopefully the webbing is the same, because this has like a really specific type of webbing, but we'll see. I said to the guy, look, what I'll do is I'll at least get the driver's side done, and if it doesn't match the webbing on the passenger side, I'll just take the passenger side out and set it out to get it re-webbed. I think it's more important to keep the original you know, hardware and things like that for the car, just to keep it original looking. So I'll send these out, put them in a box, and get it out and get it back. Well, I got the new seatbelt installed. Had them just re-web the old hardware, and had it all put in. It was pretty easy. I mean, just a couple screws here and there. You just take these trim pieces off, and then this panel comes off, and that whole seat belt is reeler is in here. So it's pretty straightforward. The only difference is that the belt webbing is slightly different than the original one. You could see the webbing. I don't know if you could see there's like lines in the original webbing. They sent back the original webbing, but the new webbing doesn't have the lines. So if you look closely, it doesn't match the other side. But you know, for a driver and for now, I'm gonna do this. If it really drives me nuts, I might end up taking the other reeler out on the right side and then changing it out. But for now, we got the seat belts done, and go back to driving. So, driving an old 911, an air-cooled 911, you know, there's a certain bit of familiarity. They've made them all feel the same. I mean, I think, you know, with the first production in 1965, it's pretty amazing. They definitely have had the same feel through many, many years. I mean, this one's in '87, but they definitely have similar feels. You think about 20, 30 years, 40 years of cars, they really have a familiarity to them. And this one especially, since I've known it for most of my adult driving life. And the thing is, people either they like 911s or they don't like 911s. I mean, some people call them, you know, angry Volkswagens. They feel like they're, you know, they're air cooled. They just, some people just don't like them, especially with the rear wheel drive. But I also feel like that's one of the reasons why people like them, is that they have a really light steering, because all the weight is in the back of the car. So the steering feels very light and yet very controlled. I mean, it feels very responsive. I mean, it's like the tightness of the front suspension and the lightness really allows this car to feel very nimble. And on top of it, when you really accelerate on it, it pushes from the rear. It really feels like the car squats and pushes. So it allows the wheels to dig in, the traction to dig in on the rear wheels. And then it's balanced well enough that it's not like it's lifting off the front end. So it's one of those feelings that you, once you've experienced it, you either love it or you hate it. But when you love it, nothing else drives like a 911. Also, it's just this air-cooled sound. I mean, you can hear that engine. You know, I think because it's not, it's air-cooled, so the fins and everything are kind of exposed. So the whole sound of the engine is a lot louder. So you hear the growl of the engine more than you have something where it's got water jackets around it. Some people don't like it because then it sounds too rattly. Also, you've got this whir of the cooling fan. That's what you hear when you start it. This whirring sound. But that's also, you know, very indicative of a 911. So, the other funny thing that I always remember about 911 is my first experience of driving one. The early, or up until, I guess, the water-cooled cars, they were all bottom hinge pedals. So the pedals hinged from the floor, so you had to get used to that. And the clutch take-up is interesting because it's a real interesting lever that pops out into gear, or pops out into engagement. So you have to be ready to catch it, or else you'll stall the car out. It's not like it's a heavy clutch, but it's just an interesting take-up. You know, it's all the little quirks of a 911 that I think make it endearing. The other nice thing about 911s is the brakes have always been great. I mean, even stock brakes. The 911 brakes are just superior to most other cars. Stock brakes. I think one of the reasons is because the braking, because of the weight transfer, with all the weight in the back of the car, when you hit the brakes, they have good brakes in the front, but when that weight transfers, it really allows all four brakes to really work efficiently. You can really hear that that cooling fan just whirring away. Just a very common 911 sound. And then the other funny thing with the Carreras of the Motronics, there's this like just a slight hunt of idle that it just does. It's not hunting, it's just this interesting sound that I find normally from this like era of 911. So the funny thing is, when I was a kid, I used to read all the specs of 911s. I used to think that Porsches, well, not used to think, I mean, I still think Porsches are pretty cool cars, but when I was a kid, I was just obsessed with Porsche. I mean, just read all their brochures and knew all the specs. And I remember reading the specs of a 911 SC or a Carrera like this age, and reading like 0 to 60 times. I think it was it 5.2 or is it 6.2? But I just remember like thinking to myself, oh my God, that's like so fast. I mean, I didn't know anything that did 0 to 60s that fast. You know, I never drove something that fast. I mean, these cars were the fastest that I knew of. And it's funny in retrospect when you look at now where cars are 0 to 60 in like 2.8 seconds or almost 2 seconds flat. It's pretty amazing because it was just mind-blowing back then how fast, you know, a 5-second 0 to 60 was. Nowadays, this car, you know, even though it's plenty fast, it's just not fast compared to modern cars. But yet, it's not antiquated. I mean, it doesn't feel old. I mean, it feels vintagey, but it doesn't feel old in the sense of like it doesn't keep up with traffic. I mean, it's still plenty powerful to get around town, and on top of it, it's very nimble, stops well, still stops better than most cars. And because 911's been made in the same shape for so long, it still has a current and valid shape to it. You know, it's not like, oh, that's an old car. You could drive this around and people might think, oh wow, that's an old car, but they really can't place it in age, just simply because it's still got that 911 shape. The other nice thing about these G-body cars is that there's no power steering. Doesn't need it. It's a light car, so you really don't have that disconnection that you have sometimes with power steering. Now, admittedly, the modern Porsches with power steering, you really can't. They designed it so you do definitely get road feel. But this car without power steering, you don't miss it at all. Also, on this 87, it has the G50 transmission, the legendary G50. I don't know how legendary it is, but everybody loves the G50. Part of it is because it has beefier synchronizers than the old 915 transmission. But I don't necessarily think a 915 transmission is a slouch. I just think that when you have a better transmission, everybody wants the, you know, supposedly stronger, beefier synchronizers. But if you drive a 915 transmission with care, you know, it'll last just as long as a G50. I think you have to heel and toe, you have to match revs. You can't expect the synchronizers to keep up in all situations. So that is the downside of the synchronizers on a 915. I mean, when I used to track my old air-cooled 911 with a 915 transmission, I could definitely feel the synchronizers were working their little hearts out trying to keep up. So, you know, you really had to learn how to become proficient at heel and toe. Otherwise, that transmission was not going to last long. I have not tracked this car yet, so I don't know how well it keeps up, but on a 915. All right, well, I'm going to put this car to bed for the winter. If the weather stays good, I can always take it out and drive it a little bit. But for right now, I'm going to put it away for you know, the next few weeks, and if I get a chance, I'll take it out and drive it every once in a while. But it's ready to go to sleep for a little bit.